Hello friends, I'm happy to give you my update on the Bleeding Charge Barbarian, which melts everything in T100 and of course against Duriels and friends. Before I begin, I wanted to tell you that this build is not using snapshot and will still be as good as it is when Blizzard fixed the exploit. If you like the content, don't forget to subscribe and I'll explain everything in that video. Before I begin on the skills, you need to fully understand how the Charge Barbarian works, because if I just want to hit this dummy, you'll see that it's not very effective. So I just right click on it and as you can see, I just missed my charge. The thing is that you'll want to make sure to click just a bit below your target. If I click here, for example, it will work. If I click directly on the dummy, it will not work. So make sure when you click here, you'll see that I perfectly hit my dummy. So it's very important that you understand that you want to always click here and you don't want to directly click on the target in order for you to hit 100% of your charge. In dungeons it doesn't matter too much because you'll quickly clear anything, but against bosses it's very important to not do that and to make sure to click just here. For this build you'll be playing a Rend with charge and also bash in order to have a very good setup of swapping weapons and damage over time. Make sure on this weapon to have the 200 mace, on this one the 200 sword and on this one the 200 mace too. You'll also be playing the Rallying Cry in order to be unstoppable, War Cry to grant you berserking and this one for the stats. For the gear you want to play this helm which will grant you armor. You can also get some resistances, life and armor on it. You want for it basic attack which will grant you some damage reduction. You can also get plenty of damage reduction and also make sure to have damage when you swap to new weapons. As we always swap weapons, it will be very good to have. Then for the gloves you want attack speed, critical strike chance and +4 to run if possible, not +3. And for the aspect, increase damage for 7 seconds on physical. For the pants you want to have plenty of damage reductions, +4 to charges and also damage reduction based on bleeding enemies. If you are doing bosses, you can go for this one, it will boost your damage, but on T100 dungeons, this one will give you more sustain. So just keep this one here and then you can swap if you are doing dungeons or bosses. Then for the boots, you want to extend the duration of berserking, you can get some resistances, damage reduction while injured and some stats. After that, for the weapons, make sure to get some damage over time, overpower damage, a bit of damage while berserking, and if you want, vulnerable damage, which can be a bit interesting afterwards in the Paragon. You can also get critical strike damage and some stats if you want. Then you want to have this one which will call for ancients on your charge, this one to increase your attack speed when you land a critical hit with the core skill, this one to inflict bleeding during berserking based on your damage, which will be obviously very good too, and this one finally to have when you swap 8 times your weapon overpower. Then we play this ring. There's a tricky thing to know because we'll have automatically additional stack to swap weapon even if we only play charge, because if I spam my charge I will have additional stack. I will wait the cooldown, I do not click any other attack, I just keep my charge and you'll see that you'll have additional stack. So I was to 3, 4, 5 and so on. That's because it will apply some stacks of runs and you'll be able to easily spam charge in dungeons. If you're not in dungeons, make sure to swap between Rend, bash and charge, which will be very efficient against bosses, but in dungeons with this setup you'll be able to have overpower hit simply with charge. Then for the other ring, you want to have the fact that when you stun a bleeding enemy, it will deal damage on them. That's why we use bash. And for the stats, you want critical strike chance damage, physical damage and damage to bleeding enemies. For the amulet, the fact that when you use a core skill, it will increase the damage of charge. And on it, you want also damage when you swap to weapon, damage reduction from bleeding enemies, and if possible, fury cost reduction. For the mastery, you'll want to play the 200 weapon in order to have increased bleeding damage with Rend and also to have increased bleeding damage when you kill an enemy. For the construct, make sure to have flash of adrenaline, increase the duration, decrease the cooldown and additional damage reduction. For the other skill, you want to have the Tempest with the fact that you'll have increased critical strike chance, this one to increase damage to moving enemies with bleeding, and finally this one to boost a bit the damage of your Seneschal. For the skill tree, you want to get this one in order to have an overpower hit with Rend, and with Rend extend vulnerable duration, and this one to increase damage to vulnerable enemies. 3 points for the life and damage reduction, 1 point to be unstoppable, and this one in order to grant some fury. Then you want to have here berserking and fortification. This one 5 points to do damage, and this one for the cooldown reduction. 3 points here for the damage reduction, 2 points, you can put 3 points if you prefer in order to grant you berserking when you do a charge, and this one 3 points to increase your damage, 3 points to have increased critical strike chance on stunned enemies, and 3 points to increase bleeding to vulnerable enemies. You can put the last point here if you want, and then you have 3 points here in order to increase critical strike damage, 3 points for the overpowered damage, and this one to stun your enemies. Finally, we'll be playing Gushing Wounds in order to have a very good combo with Overpower and to boost your overall damage. For the Paragon, you want to have this one which will increase your damage when you swap to new weapon. As we always swap, it will be very good, and also additional critical strike chance on it. Then you want this node which will increase your bleeding damage based on your vulnerable damage. That's why it's good to have some vulnerable damage on your stats and also on the Paragon setup. Then you want to get here, get this glyph damage to close enemies, and get this one damage to physical damage over time. You get this one which will grant you damage when you land an overpower hit on a vulnerable enemy, or when you make an enemy vulnerable, so it's very good to get this one too. Then you get here this glyph damage while berserking, and this node for the attack speed. Then you go here, you take this node damage to bleeding enemies, and we won't take this node. Then you go here, get this glyph vulnerable damage, which will be also good to combo with this one, and the last node, this one, which will increase your berserking damage bonus, and very important to get this one. You can also take this node in order to finish your Paragon setup. I'll finish this video with some gameplay, T100 and Duriel, and just keep in mind these two things. If you're doing some nightmare dungeons, just use the charge and you'll see that everything melts quite easily. If you're against bosses, you'll want to use bash, rend, charge, and then again bash, rend, charge when you have the stack number 8. Once you have it, you'll see that it's quite easy and that overall you'll kill everything very fast. Thanks for watching, I hope that you'll enjoy this build and have plenty of fun on the Bleeding Charge Barbarian on the Season 3 of Diablo 4.